Good evening. I'm John Bailey. This is People to be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. And tonight you've got Stephen Rolandi, who appeared on this program a couple of weeks ago before the election. You know the election I mean, the greatest, most unbelievable election of all time. And Mr. Rolandi actually predicted the win of Mr. Biden, and it was not as much margin as you expected, but you did pick him just the same. And you also explored with us on the what would happen afterwards. And now we are about, it seems like 2 weeks since the election, but it's only been like a week and 2 days, right?
Correct.
And what did you think?
Okay, the results were, I think, pretty much what I thought. I actually called every state with the exception of Georgia, which is now in a recount situation. The turnout is the highest in terms of raw numbers in American history. Almost 160 million people have voted. It is about 67%. And you'd have to go back to 1908 for the closest. The all-time record was set in 1876. That is, I think, a victory for democracy. Democracy was on the ballot, and we did very well there. If you go to other European countries, the percentages are much higher, but it is what it is. 100 million people voted early. That shattered all the records. I had said 60 million on this show a few weeks ago. So in terms of turnout, excellent. The surprising thing with the election is that the Democrats underperformed at the congressional level and the Senate level and down ballot.
Where they had to perform.
They underperformed.
But that's where they
For
had to
example, in the Senate, they have 48 seats. The Republicans have 50. The balance of power in the Senate will be decided at the Georgia runoff elections in January. The reason analysts are saying they apparently underperformed, they did not do as well with Hispanic or Spanish-speaking voters, and the Republican charges of defunding police and socialism, if the Democrats came back to the presidency, apparently resonated with a number of voters. And Mr. Biden has an impressive victory. He has received the highest number of votes, 80 million at last count. President Trump, not to be outdone, is the highest for a losing candidate. It is the highest for a Republican candidate for the presidency. And he actually got more votes than President Obama did. And the president will still be a force to be reckoned with in the next several years.
Jim?
Well, I think the interesting thing is the fact that it seemed that the Republicans on the down part of the ticket grew.
Yes.
And I don't know exactly what that says about the voting public, but the Republican Party is gaining some kind of strength. They didn't want the top of the ticket, but they wanted the lower part of the ticket.
Yes, yes. If you look at a map, I was looking for a map because I gave a talk earlier this week. If you drill down by counties, it's very blue on the coasts. Then when you get to the heartland, flyover country, it is still very red. There were more Republican women elected to the House and the state legislatures, for example. Republicans did exceedingly well in the rural parts of the country. And among white voters, these are called the low propensity white voters who seem to come out, they seem to come out once every 4 years. Many of them came out for President Obama. They came out for President Trump in 2016. They came out for him in this time. They did not come out in 2018 when you had the blue wave. The Democrats apparently have lost about 10 seats in the House. They still have the majority, but it will be a reduced majority come January.
So we discussed on the previous program the possibility of Mr. Trump challenging. Well, he's done more than that. Could you outline for us the lawsuits, the recounts, the possibility of a case reaching the Supreme Court?
Okay, I'll try. Well, since we were here last, there's been approximately 25 lawsuits filed, mostly in the states. And the strategy, I think, is 4 parts. It is part legal, it is part political, it is part financial, and it is part PR. Some of the suits have been thrown out. They're just ridiculous. In the state of Michigan, there was one lawsuit. They didn't even meet the filing deadline. They filed in the wrong court. In the state of Wisconsin, there was an allegation that 100,000 people more voted who were not on the rolls. Then somebody realized, oh, wait a minute, there's 3,006,000 there are more people on the rolls than we thought. So there's no issue in the state of Wisconsin. There's no issues really in the state of Michigan. If I were Trump, what I think he's got to look at, he's got to pick back 3 states. He's got to pick back Arizona, Pennsylvania, and the state of Georgia,
Well,
where there are recounts
I see.
there's a request for a recount in Pennsylvania, there's a request underway now in the state of Georgia. The strategy will be, if he cannot be successful, cannot change those results, try to delay the lawsuits so then that the electors in those states cannot meet, whereupon then the legislature could appoint electors under the Constitution. The problem there is, however, that these are Democratic-controlled legislatures and governors. Try to delay it further so these electors cannot participate, so then you might have a situation of no one winning in the Electoral College, which meets December the 14th, and then it would trigger what's called a contingent election in the House and the Senate, which we have not seen since 1825. It is doubtful that it's going to go that far. The lawsuits are being thrown out at the state level. There's very little evidence. In one state, there was an allegation of maybe 50 people, dead people voting. Then it turned out, oh no, it's not really 50 dead people, it's more like 25. There's a lot of lawsuits, but the facts are not bearing them out. They're being thrown out. If you look at the margins in some of these states, Pennsylvania, it's a 50,000 lead for Biden. Trump's got to find 50,000 plus. Michigan, forget it. It's 150,000 plurality. The only potential legal issue may be going to the Supreme Court, maybe the state of Pennsylvania, where there is an allegation that the early voting may have been unconstitutional. I personally find that hard to accept because we've had early voting in this country since 1992. The other allegation is that the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, by permitting receipt of ballots 3 days after the election, so long as they've been postmarked, some are arguing that she overstepped her discretion. And maybe that's a federal issue. But the only number of ballots you could throw out would be those ballots, and she says, according to the count, it's not even close to 50,000. John Roberts, there was an article in I forget which, I saw it, said they may not want to take the case. The Supreme Court, after all, has discretionary authority to hear a case. Right. So this gets back to my other point. I think what the president wants to do is to keep the base ginned up, those 2 critical elections in Georgia in January. And my understanding is under campaign finance laws, you can ask for funds for legal expenses, legal defense. He's lawyered up, but you might be able to reprogram some of that money to pay campaign bills, of which I understand are now mounting.
Yeah, well,
So that's what I think it's a 4-part strategy, and I don't think it's just legal. I think there are other aspects.
Scaramucci was on television, and he said that that's what Trump is doing.
I believe so. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, John Bailey and Jim Benerofe here on People to be Heard with Stephen Rolandi. And Mr. Rolandi has spanned government in higher education and not-for-profit sectors. He teaches courses in public administration, finance, and management. He has over 10 years of experience teaching public administration at City University of New York, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and Pace University. And he is also a guest lecturer at Long Island University, Rutgers University, and none of his views expressed today reflect those of his employers.
Thank you for the disclaimer.
Or White Plains TV.
Okay.
But he was accurate in predicting the election, and it was a doozy. Right up until 2 a.m., I'm saying, my God, he's coming back, you know. But be that as it may, the Biden transition, what do you make of it?
He is proceeding as any other transition you would expect. I've been reading, the website was established, it's for those who are interested, www.buildbackbetter.com. He announced a COVID task force, a bipartisan COVID task force. These are experts. David Kessler, who was in the Reagan and Bush 41 administrations. He has announced an advisory commission. It's bipartisan. Cindy McCain, the widow of the late Senator McCain, is on it. I think yesterday, the day before, he has announced the formation of agency review teams. These are the people that are going to be trying to develop policy. Many of them are volunteers. Many of them come out of academia, Georgetown, Princeton, Columbia, Harvard, the law firms. Nonprofit groups, and there is a team that has been established for each and every department of the federal government. So it is proceeding the way it should. Now, will he get the space allocation? Will he get the funds to do the transition? That remains to be seen.
Right, Jim?
That website again is
www.buildbackbetter.com. And you can actually get on their mailing list if you want news, if you want updates. I've also told my students, if you're looking for a position in the Biden administration, at some point they will be receiving resumes.
Yes.
I actually did that 20 years ago when George W. Bush was elected, and I had worked at HUD as an intern, and I got a nice response back, and they asked me to put an application in. So I would urge that. It's really, I'm very impressed. They are really proceeding assiduously, and they're doing the right thing.
And President-elect Biden is getting more ink than Mr. Trump,
Yes. Yes.
which is a switch.
And not only here, but overseas. How many heads of... The Pope called him, I think, the other day to congratulate him.
Right.
She called him also.
Go, Jim?
I just had mentioned Chinese President Xi.
I don't think we've heard from him. We haven't heard from Mr. Putin.
Yeah,
There's
no,
a
they
news
said
report.
that was on the radio this
Oh,
morning.
he did? He did,
Yeah.
okay. There's a news report that Mr. Putin now may be in some ill health.
Yes, reported by the
Daily
Daily
Mail.
Mail,
Yes, yes.
which is, I don't, but they always, no one loves the tabloids. They think they're terrible journalism, but they get stuff.
We'll see.
They get stuff,
We'll
right?
see. We'll see.
And stuff that other places won't touch because they'll think they'll get killed.
Yes, yes.
Exactly. Now, impact of the census.
Okay. The census is expected, a final report is to be delivered to the president at the end of the year, December 31st. And for your viewers, the way the census works, it is the count of legally all persons in the United States. And it measures population shifts. The reason that's important because under reapportionment, we have to realign the number of districts, congressional districts across the country. It is capped at 435. It's been that way since 1920, I believe. So some of the states that are going to gain seats are Texas, Florida, Alabama. The state of New York, California, Illinois are going to lose seats.
Really?
So the red states will probably gain some seats in the House, and that has a bearing on the determination of the number of votes for the Electoral College. There's a corresponding effect because then reapportionment has to take place at the state level and at the local governmental level, and I believe that this will be the last time we will have redistricting done by the state legislature. The next time that happens, I believe that'll be the 2030. It'll be done by an independent districting commission. So there's implications for representation
Quote,
and for
independent.
politics.
Quote,
Yes.
independent. Right.
Related to the census is the question that Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia may become states. Puerto Rico, I understand, had a referendum. They have approved, they are in favor now of becoming admitted to the Union as a state. In the District of Columbia, what they probably would do, they would shrink the district because it was set up by a constitutional amendment to within the 9-block radius. Which means whoever sits in the
Nine-block state, right.
whoever sits in the White House controls 3 electoral votes. The rest of Washington, D.C., the neighborhoods like Anacostia, Adams Morgan, Georgetown, will become a state to be entitled Washington Douglas Commonwealth. And so they would get 2 senators and 2 House members. There was even a design for a 52-star flag. I've seen it. So
Basically, an area the size of White Plains gets 2 senators? Is that what you just said?
because there's 750,000 people in what would be Washington District.
That's
WDC.
very instructive. Yeah.
So that would have a bearing conceivably if the Senate were to go along and the president signs it. You would then that would have a bearing on the next, conceivably, the next presidential election.
Well, it would perhaps be the only blue state, correct?
Puerto Rico, I don't know. A lot of Hispanic voters supported the president, so I'm not sure it would be a lock for the Democrats. So there's those. So that's the census is going to have a lot of, in addition to telling us a lot about the country, where people are moving. It's a gold mine of information.
Right. Now the prospects for 2021, 2022, and 2024 elections, from what you just said about the census, it looks as if the Republican states, or the red states, as you will, there'll be more red states, more representatives, and this is not good for future Democratic aspirants.
Conceivably, potentially. Now, I
Yes,
should tell you, looking ahead to, well, 21 is what we call an off-year election. We will have elections here in Westchester County, the city of New York, where I used to work for. You'll have elections in the state of Virginia, in New Jersey. 22, 34 senators will be up for re-election. These will be people who were elected or re-elected in 16. 22 of those are Republicans. They will be defending seats. So it'll be interesting to see if the Democrats can defeat some of them. They have to go through some soul searching because their strategy was not successful. They lost 10 seats in the House. At the moment,
10 seats
in the House.
Yeah,
In other words,
wow.
so they still have a majority, but the majority is reduced. Nancy Pelosi she will be she'll be the speaker again, but she's come under criticism from some of her members that they have to change tactics if they want to do better in the midterms. And the midterms many times are a referendum on the party and who controls the White House.
Right.
So we'll see.
Now, speaking of the years ahead, I mean, if the Georgia seats are not picked up by the Democrats,
Okay.
then they are the minority. But if they do win them, it's tied 50-50,
Correct.
and Nancy Pelosi, no.
No. It would be
the vice president
Kamala Harris.
is the swing vote.
She would be, as the presiding officer of the Senate,
Yes.
would break ties.
Sorry
This would be a
about that.
role, no, that's
Yeah.
a good question. That would be a role similar to what Dick Cheney had 20 years ago when the Senate was evenly divided.
Yes, we remember Dick Cheney, silent but deadly.
There's another possibility. There might be pressure on one or other senators to switch conferences. In other words, if let's say you're Susan Collins, I'm not happy with Mitch McConnell anymore. I'm going to become an independent. I will align with the Democrats. The Democrats would have the majority. It's happened before. Actually, Joe Biden got Arlen Specter to switch. They used to ride the train home on Amtrak, and the president-elect got Senator Specter to change parties.
How did the pollsters do this time?
They did slightly better, but they need improvement. If you look at the presidential level, they predicted, for the most part, a 7 to 8 point lead that the President-elect Biden would receive. It looks like he's got 3.5 points. They missed something. They thought the Democrats would get the Senate back. They did not get the Senate back. There were some serious questions as to how they did the polling. They were a little more careful. They have to look at, just for example, what size sample are you using? Sometimes they would do, we'll poll 500 voters across the country. So there's some question with the methodology. Some pollsters would call people up at home 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah,
Parents are getting kids to go to bed. They're preparing dinner. Oh, we want to ask you 30 questions on the phone right now.
Yeah, 30 questions.
So they want to get them off the phone. Just tell them something, and that's it. We had a lot of Trump supporters did not want to tell people who they wanted to vote for.
You agree with me on that? Then.
Now,
Yeah.
the only pollster who I think caught it was Gallup, the Gallup organization, because right before the election they said the president had a 46% approval rating. And what did he receive with the results? 47 and a fraction.
Wow.
Gallup
so
apparently
is
was the
on
only
it.
one. Maybe Marist and Quinnipiac were a little closer. So they got to do. They still got homework to do.
How can they control that they're getting an honest answer from?
I don't know. I'm not a trained pollster or statistician. I know some people, you maybe want to have them on, that could tell you. There's probably a way you can tell. But to call somebody up, if somebody called me at 7 o'clock in the evening, oh, I got 25 or 30 questions I want to ask you.
No, absolutely. They call it absolutely the wrong times, and they should know that. Now, future of the Republican Party.
I said a few weeks ago I was not sanguine. I am still not sanguine. The party of Reagan, the party of Lincoln, now looks like it will be a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump organization. The president has indicated he may run for re-election in 24. That'll freeze a lot of candidates. He's indicated, or there's been a report, that his son may become the chair of the RNC, and they would turn it into a money-making operation. He received 73 million plus votes, and that's a force to be reckoned with. Where a lot of moderate Republicans may go, or establishment Republicans, there's some talk of a formation Lincoln Project might be involved, of a new conservative party. Watch what former Senator Jeff Flake does. We'll see. I'll give a shout out. We have the SAM Party here in New York and Connecticut. That might be a centrist party. That might be a home for some people to gravitate
But
to.
are these small parties absolute red herrings that affect a lot of principled voters, but do not sway the majorities and cost votes, like Jill Stein did when she ran.
She paid $7 million for a recount in Michigan, and it got Trump about another 1,300 votes. This is a lot of money. I don't know. This is going to be a work in progress, but I'm not hopeful from what I see so far, at least at the national level, for the GOP.
And now, do you see the Senate, the Democrats winning those 2 Georgia seats? Put on your
All right,
crystal-
it's hard. It's hard. First off, there will be 3 weeks of early voting before January the 5th. President Biden has a 14,000 vote lead. It's subject now to recounts. You're going to see about $100 million spent for the Republican candidates, $100 million for the Democrats. They're going to pour a lot of money. I note Stacey Abrams built up her organization. She lost the governor's race. If I had to hazard a guess today, my guess is the Democrats will get one and the Republicans will get the other. So then you're going to go into January with a 51-49 Republican majority. But we'll see. I know, this is an election that's going to occur right around the holidays, so we'll see. And I'm sure President Trump and President-elect Biden will probably get involved.
True. Now, do you think there is a pardon in the future for President Trump?
The president's pardoning power is absolute.
Pardon himself.
He may. There's been speculation he may just do that.
Yeah.
He may want to pardon some members of his family. Could a pardon like that be challenged in court? Maybe. Would it be successful? We do not know. I will tell you that a pardon implies some guilt and acceptance of some wrongdoing. It would only immunize him at the federal level. He is subject to lawsuits and legal actions at the state level, most notably the state of New York and California. So, but he may pardon some other officials. If you remember, Bill Clinton was doing a whole raft of pardons the few days of his
Mr.
term.
Rich was pardoned
Yes,
by Mr.
yes,
Clinton.
yes.
Mark Rich was,
Yes.
right? And that did not sit well with me.
Yeah.
But
We'll see.
odd that it was named Rich, wasn't it?
What specifically is Trump pardoning himself for?
You would
Crimes
be
against humanity.
Any crimes against the United States. Just go back to when President Ford pardoned Richard Nixon for any crimes that he may have committed against the United States. And that was a blanket pardon.
Yes. Now, something happened this week. President Trump appointed 4 new veteran military people to
Defense
head
Department.
up the Pentagon, and I wanted to know what you thought of that. Does the Pentagon have absolute control over the
Okay.
military, or is the military Joint Chiefs of Staff
Okay.
play into this mix?
Okay, excellent question. Somebody asked me the other day. If you remember, when you see the president get off the helicopter, there's usually a military official that has a briefcase. That is the football. That is the codes to launch a nuclear war, okay, or a nuclear attack. There's something called a gold card that I think you start. That's how it works in general. Okay, here's how this works. And there was a statute that Congress passed in 1986 called the Goldwater-Nichols Act. And it defines what's called the chain of command. The chain of command is the president. The vice president has a potential veto, but only if they exercise the 25th Amendment. The chain of command would then go to the Secretary of Defense, who would verify the orders. The Secretary of Defense, not the Joint Chiefs. The Joint Chiefs only get involved for purposes of planning, training, and personnel readiness. The order would then go from the Secretary of Defense, and we have an acting now, not Mr. Esper is out of the picture, would then go to your regional commanders. These are professional military people who have taken an oath to the Constitution. If they believe it's an illegal or inappropriate action, they could decline to enforce it. There is some pushback. These are the professionals, okay? I should also tell you something else would happen. If there's going to be a nuclear attack, the President of the United States has to be relocated, and his family, and the Vice President, and the senior cabinet officials, because if there's going to be a nuclear attack, you have to expect a counterattack. The senior officials have to relocate to undisclosed locations. I had a colleague during the Reagan administration. She had the #2 position in New York with the Department of Health and Human Services. and she would have to go through exercises every once in a while so that the government would still continue underground. So there's a lot of steps here. Now, why did he do it? I think he's just acting out. He's taking retribution. I think he criticized Fox News the other day. I have another theory that maybe President Putin is going to move somewhere in Eastern Europe or against NATO, and he may figure, now I have a free hand, that the president is not going to respond. Maybe Belarus. There's been a lot of protests with the recent re-election of the autocratic president there. Maybe Moldova, maybe Ukraine. That's what I think. I hope not. I could see where you're thinking it might look like a coup, preparations for a coup. I hope I'm wrong.
I hope so too. Now, have we overlooked anything? What could you look into your crystal ball? It's a mess. We do not know what's going to happen, right?
We have a transition that is moving. It's proceeding. All right. I think at some point the president-elect is going to get the monies and the office space to start the transition. I would tell you 20 years ago that transition started late because we had Bush v. Gore litigation. I just think the president is looking very foolish. If he's serious about running again in 24, his brand is important. I don't think he'll see him at the inauguration. I think he'll, like Richard Nixon was not at Ford's inauguration, I think he'll just go somewhere. Maybe Pence will preside as representing the outgoing administration.
Well, Stephen Rolandi, you have been heard.
Thank you.
A lot of things we did not know, I did not know, and I think a lot of you didn't know. So tune in again if you missed anything.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, John Bailey and Jim Benerofe, thank you very much. Oh, that's right. I am sorry. Violation of protocol. So
Okay.
at any rate, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you again.
Rolandi.
Thank you.
And John Bailey, Jim Benerofe. Good night for People to be Heard.